Thank you for being here, everyone, and welcome to the 1110 Living Soils panel. The length of the panel is going to be starting now and running about 50 minutes till noon. We're going to do about 40-45 minutes of conversation, and then all three of our guest speakers were very excited to take your questions. So then we'll switch over and do 10 or 15 minutes of questions from you. For those of you who are new to probiotic and living soil, and you're here as a beginner, building living soil with active microbe life is the progression of growing versus what we're used to experience during the early Prohibition indoor days, where soil might as well have been styrofoam, and then you just super pack it with nutrients. This new idea we're going to be talking about today considers the soil as a living participant in your grow, and our goal is to foster microorganism communities within your soil to help the plant. So that makes us as much soil farmers as cannabis farmers. So first, let's welcome our guests. From this side, let's start with, this is Anne Bikle. Anne is a biologist, gardener, and co-author of several probiotic and regenerative agriculture books, including The Hidden Half of Nature, The Microbial Roots of Life and Health. And also, right after this presentation, she will be at the Mammoth Microbes booth doing a book signing if you'd like to meet her and get a copy of your book signed. To her left is Colin Bell. Colin is the co-founder and co-inventor and chief growth officer at Growcentia, but you're probably more familiar with them as Modern Microbes and their fabulous product, Mammoth P. Colin received his PhD in biological sciences, specializing in soil microbial ecology and plant microbe interactions. And to his left, Tad Hussey. Tad is a living soil educator and host of the Cannabis Cultivation and Science podcast. He's also owner of Keep It Simple Organics and Edible Nursery, Production Greenhouse, Outdoor Preschool, and Organic Hydroponics Shop and online store nearby here in Redmond, Washington, and also at kisorganics.com. I am Shango Los, host of the Shaping Fire podcast. If you enjoy hearing experts like this talking about their particular niche of cannabis, I encourage you to check out my podcast at shapingfire.com. There is a postcard for it in your convention bag. So we're going to get started right in. Let's see here. So Anne, why don't we start with you since you're on the side? So historically, cannabis growers have been taught to pack their cannabis soil with isolated nutrients that are all nutrients that the plant needs, but they're not necessarily participating with each other. What is a method that you find successful to transition towards waking up the soil to rely more on microbe communities as a whole instead of individual supplements?
Yeah, I think for me, Shango, the way I think about things is that once you realize that the soil is really about not only physics and chemistry, but the missing link in soil that people are really starting to embrace and study and integrate into growing practices is the biology. Because in many ways, it's the biology that makes the physics and the chemistry and the movement of things in the soil, nutrients, minerals, and things like that, move from the soil into the green body of a plant. And normally when I do talks, I have this particular slide that I really like, because every time that I look at it, I can just sort of sink into the world of soil and a very unique area in the soil that is nanometers to millimeters right around every single root. And that space is called the Rhizosphere. And the Rhizosphere is a wild and alive place that all of us need to know about, and we need to know what goes on in there. So I'll just pick that word apart a little bit for folks. So rhizo means root. Sphere, of course, is about. It's an area about the root. And it is in the rhizosphere that what you really have is a biological bazaar. B-A-Z-A-A-R. So in your mind, sort of conjure up, somewhere in the Middle East, you've got these traders that are coming in with wares that none of the other traders have. And so you have this constant, ceaseless back and forth trade stuff. But what the microbial communities are trading is really pretty mind-blowing. They are producing metabolites from what they're consuming for energy, and some of these metabolites have medicinal effects on plants. Some metabolites function as growth hormones. So let's think about this for a minute. You have one sector of life, microbial, and it's making what we in our human world would call products, and they are supplying those products to the green bodies of plants. And what are plants doing? Plants have their own wares, unique to them, that they trade back. And it's different sorts of nutrients, carbohydrates, or amino acids, fats, we're learning, and fats, proteins, carbohydrates. Yeah, that's it. So, it's just sort of lost there in the biological bazaar for a minute. And so this is what we need to think about when we think about soil, and when you think about whatever kind of plant you're growing, that this is really what you're feeding, is you're feeding the things that are bringing their wares to the biological bazaar.
Tom, you remember the question?
I do have a question. So we think about why we're using synthetic nutrients and why that's so intuitive, and why we think about it as microbiologists. I have a PhD in soil microbiology. I've thought about this and plant microbe interactions in the rhizosphere and how microbes interact within the plant rhizosphere for a long time. And there's a huge problem that farmers face is that chemical fertilizers, although they're very intuitive, we can easily tie how the NPK and fertilizers are assimilated in the plant growth and why they're very important. And so they can be applied with precision in agriculture and in cannabis farming. Totally get that. The microbiology is less intuitive and it takes more of a learning curve, but it's critical. We see in agriculture settings how farmers have been trained to apply synthetic fertilizers for years and decades. And what we see is a decline in soil health. That's very, very interesting because it actually declines the biology in those soils to facilitate nutrient cycling, so the microbes can actually help liberate nutrients and make them bioavailable for plants. Microbes are critical to liberate and maximize what I'm going to call nutrient use efficiency. In precision agriculture, cannabis farming, we want to maximize precision. This is a precision farming industry, and to do that, we want to incorporate all our inputs into the plant. And we're going to do that with the help of not only maximizing our understanding and applications of fertilizer use, but with incorporating biology and microbiology to help with that. We can't accomplish that without incorporating microbes, which, as they do in nature, in our grows, cycle nutrients to maximize the bioavailability of any nutrient that we add into our substrate so the plants can take them up.
Yeah, I think they covered it really well. What I would add is just to simplify the process a little bit. When we put out organic fertilizer or any organic ball of nutrients, we have to keep in mind, more or less, we're not directly feeding that plant, but we're feeding these microbial communities as a way of cycling those nutrients into forms that the plant can take up. So it's important to keep that in mind. And then the other thing I like to consider is just how valuable that process is to the plant, in the sense that it's photosynthesizing all this light, turning it into energy, and putting it back out through the roots. I think the statistic I read was up to 60% in certain plants goes back out in the form of exudates, the sugars, carbons, carbohydrates, and proteins, to directly feed the bacteria, fungi, protozoa, all these organisms that we're talking about. And there's so much that we still don't know about the soil and what's going on under our feet in terms of this interaction that it almost feels arrogant to me to think that we can come up with a synthetic program that can mimic or come even close to what we get from a healthy biological process when nature's doing what it does. And I would just end that with saying one of my favorite quotes is from a good friend of mine, author Jeff Lowenfels, and he always likes to say, there's no one putting Miracle Grow out on the redwoods. This process takes care of itself. It grows beautifully well as an ecosystem when we take care of it.
Yeah. it is interesting how, you know, we go out into these beautiful old forests and they're just, you know, fantastically thriving, and yet they're not buying anything at all.
Shane, I think that's amazing that all plants in nature depend on microbial associations, just like Tad and Anne were talking about. And for us to think that we can avoid that to maximize the health and development and quality and yield of our plants in agriculture is naive, and I think understanding how to integrate those is a really important next step for us to revolutionize agriculture and merge that with biology intuitively.
So with this next question, we're going to start back at your end, Tad, and then come on this way. So outdoor growing in native soils has become increasingly popular due to cannabis normalization, so we can go outside now, right? So what is a regenerative practice for tired native soils that outdoor cannabis growers can use to rejuvenate local soils instead of merely shipping in soils from elsewhere?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer in reusing soils. It's what happens from an agricultural perspective. You know, farmers aren't bringing in soils constantly. There's no reason as a cannabis farmer we need to be any different with our crops. In terms of that, for me, that touches more on soil testing. So we have this microbial side of things where we have the biology cycling the nutrients and making it available. But on the other end, we need to look at what's actually in that soil. And getting a soil test and analyzing it and looking at what sorts of excesses and deficiencies we may have, and then adding the proper amounts of nutrients, micro and macronutrients, to balance that out goes a long way. And that's essentially what conventional farming has been for a long time. So tying that aspect of soil testing and farming with the microbial side of things, I think is really the future of agriculture, especially when we talk about regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, I think that's right too, and I want to emphasize that, you know, I think we should think about plants as being the foundation of all life on Earth as primary producers, and everything else eats those plants or eats things that eat plants. And plants don't exist without soil. And so with that logic, soil is actually the foundation of all life, because we can't really grow plants without substrate, or at least the nutrients in that substrate, or soil. And we also have to understand that carbon is the currency of all life on Earth. And it's definitely the currency of soil health. And so making sure that you can charge your soil with appropriate carbon allows you to maintain this foundation where you can have the other ions that can persist in a soil and maintain a healthy soil. If you look at soil health, it's completely correlated with carbon. That's going to help sustain not only microbial life and microbes, or carbon. All life is carbon-based. And just the structure and dead material, carbon-related material that can hold on to the nutrients that maximize cation exchange capacity and the nutrient capacity that your plants can grow off of. Again, you have this, if you have a very healthy soil, you have a carbon-rich soil that's full of nutrients, and then you have a microbial population that helps cycle those nutrients naturally to make them in bioavailable form so your plants can take them up.
Yeah, I really like what you said, Shango, about or no, it was Tad, on the Miracle Grow in the Redwood Forest, or I guess it was Jeff Lowenfels. But here's the deal, folks. Long before we had agrochemical companies and pharmaceutical companies, for that matter, all that the botanical world had and all that we had, really, for the foundation of our health, was our respective microbiomes. And so all of this stuff that Colin and Tad have been talking about is part of this new emerging and burgeoning area of science about not just these single microbes, but the microbial communities, how it is that they are interacting with one another, and how it is they're interacting with their host, whether that's a person or a plant. And the more we learn about microbiomes, the more we are seeing how critical they are for the health and well-being of the plant host or the person. And so, Shango's question, what are some of your favorite methods for regenerating sort of dead soils? So I come at this as a person who, I live here in Seattle and built a garden about 15 years ago. And I will tell you this, I will tell you one very embarrassing moment for myself as a biologist and my husband who's a geologist and has written a great deal about soil. And you can laugh now. We didn't bother to really test our soil as we went about building this garden. So here we are one hot August day, dozens of plants in pots that have been screaming at me for months to get them out of those pots and into the ground. And we're doing a talk on Saturday, so you can see the crap soil we had. It was lighter colored than the wall in this room. And what my gut told me was, I mean, I'd gardened some, and I knew about organic matter. And I said, the problem with this soil that I can see with my eye is lack of organic matter. Things are starving and malnourished in this soil. So I went into panic mode. First I went into panic mode, and then I got really busy. I got busy rounding up free and inexpensive sources of organic matter in my wheelbarrow painted with flames, which I'm actually now going to repaint with microbes. And I loaded up all kinds of organic matter, from the neighbor's oak leaves to the coffee grounds from the coffee shop, to I made friends with arborists in the neighborhood to get their wood chips. And what I was essentially doing was collecting different sources of organic matter, and I would create mulches. I call these meals of mulches for my microbial populations. And I would layer these on the soil. And I will tell you this, there is no need to be digging all of this organic matter into your soil. It's really disruptive and disturbing to all of these tiny, tiny creatures that make up the soil microbiome. And after about 5 years, we went from soil that was the color of that wall to something that was a dark chocolatey color. And what this led my husband David and I to realize is that in pretty short order, you can restore life to the soil. And you can do it faster than Mother Nature can do it. And what we were basically mimicking is everything that happens in a forest. I mean, plants have long figured out, I mean, why do you think leaves fall off of deciduous trees and happen to land? Sort of right on top of the roots. So I always think about feeding the soil a little bit like feeding our dog, and that is that put the food out and life will come to the food. And so that is how I think about regenerating soils, because I've done it, and it did not take the century or two that it can take Mother Nature to do to get life into the soil. So in some ways, I looked at our soil initially, and I sort of thought, oh my God, we've got some kind of like mine reclamation site here. I mean, that's what it looked like, because we're dealing with, and you all know that if you're from Seattle, we've got glacial till, and there's just not much on top of that. So we built soil sort of from the top, and then it accumulated. So anyway, that's one of my favorite methods.
And
sorry, I get sort of excited about that. I'm sorry.
So that's all right. That's why we're all here, because we're all excited about this, right? So that's all right. I've got a quick follow-up question for you. I'm just learning about no-till, and one of the things that you said that stuck out for me is that when you're doing the rejuvenation of the soil, it doesn't necessarily mean dig it up, add a bunch of wild-crafted or natural supplements to break down, and then pour it back in the hole. You're suggesting not breaking up the mycelium traffic at all, and just top dressing, from what it sounds like, and letting that soak down and build without adding a shovel. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much correct. I mean, unless you really truly do have a mine reclamation site that's had heavy equipment on it, you do not. Rototillers are really roto-killers, okay? That's my new name for them. Because think about this, we have the tiniest creatures on Earth that live in the soil beneath our feet. And you take a rototiller or a plow or some kind of implement, and you start stirring that up, all you are doing is maiming and killing the soil microbiome. And so, if the soil microbiome is a source of nutrients and there's this biological bazaar and all of these exchanges going on, you don't want to be cutting that up. You want that intact and you want that functioning. And you can't really say that microbes have a brain, but they have ways of sensing what is in my meals of mulches and what is in Mammoth Microbes and what is in Tad's compost tea. And they will figure out a way to get to that and incorporate it into their bodies, and then eventually into the soil and then into the green body of the plant. So yeah, we really need to be thinking of no-till and no disturbance.
Right on. Tad, did you want to add something?
I have a little different perspective on this. I agree with what Anne's talking about in that situation. From a farming perspective, with cannabis, I know if you're trying to run a cover crop, you may need to till it back into the soil. So there are times when you have to till to bring in organic matter. But what I found works really well with our growers that are growing in raised beds is to lightly disturb the first couple inches of the soil. So we're not going very deep, but the top layer there is naturally lightly disturbed in nature anyway. But we need to get the nutrients faster into the rhizosphere if we're going to run our next cycle of crops 36 hours after we pull our first crop. So it's a little different situation when you have a garden versus you're running a commercial facility. And I do know guys that are doing literally no-till, exactly what Anne described, and getting good results too. We just found with our soils and the guys that I've worked with, we get slightly better nutrient responses by getting the nutrients a little lower into the soil.
And I think that brings out a good point, is that there is not really any only right way to do living soils, right? You're dealing with a living system that's going to respond to all the efforts that you put into it, but also it's working as a teammate trying to make up for the things that you're lacking as well. And based on your soil and your finances and what you may already have in the closet, your solution is not necessarily going to be just like your neighbor's solution. So this takes a little bit of research, maybe a lot of good research, and some patience. But in the end, you can suss out the solutions for yourself. So Tad, Colin, we're going to start with you, and then we'll go to Tad, and then back to Anne here. So a great deal of what makes cannabis thrive, express the bold colors that we love in bag appeal, and develop terpenes that just smell great are the micronutrients, right? What are one of your favorite methods to increase the presence and bioavailability of micronutrients?
So I think it comes back to knowing what nutrients you have, making sure those nutrients are available, and having the means to deliver those nutrients to the plants. And that's through a practical application of knowing what nutrients you have, applying them when you need to, and having the right microbiome, soil microbiome, rhizosphere microbiome, to help cycle and deliver those nutrients that simply. And you can test that in a couple different ways. You can obviously test your soils. You can be very conscious of what you're adding in, and you can add in everything with complete precision to the ion level as far as any kind of micronutrient you want. But then you have to understand how those inputs are transferring up to your plant. And you can do that through nutrient tissue analysis. And if you can follow nutrients from the bottle or from the bag or however your input mode of action gets into your soil and into your rhizosphere and follow those nutrients up, and then you can also look at the nutrients and the responses of your plants, you can manage that. So taking that step-by-step understanding, and everything that we do here and what we're talking about now is an experiment. There's not one right solution. Your different substrates are going to have different responses to microbes and different nutrient inputs, micronutrient inputs. The more complex the system is going to be. And I wanted to mirror off of what was said in that previous conversation. Soil health and the living soil and the microbiome is a huge thing that's going to be moving continuously more so and be more important in agriculture, but there's this practical balance. In managed systems, we are not going to mimic nature because there is this level of disturbance that is implicit with managing soils and managing crops. And so what we're trying to do is practically apply nature where it makes sense in our managed systems. And I think acknowledging the functions of nature, figuring out how to plug them in to our managed systems and applying them to get the benefits is the way we need to think about this. There's no way we're recreating nature in a pot. There's no way we're recreating nature in a bed. Nature is undisturbed for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's what makes it what it is. There's a huge scale that makes it as complex as it is. What we can do as humans is understand that, bring those in there, acknowledge our limitations, and benefit as good as we can from that.
Yeah, I like what Colin just said. It's a really good point. When we harvest the plant, we're pulling out organic matter and we're pulling out nutrients. And those need to be replaced every cycle. And that's something that you don't find typically in nature. So that's an important aspect to consider. In terms of micronutrients, he touched on soil testing. What I would say is So let's say what I typically find with cannabis is soils tend to be low in manganese, iron, copper, and sometimes zinc. And so we need to get those nutrients back into the soil. Well, the easiest way, if you have a soil test and you're trying to be organic, you can add the sulfate forms of these. So there's manganese sulfate or copper sulfate, and we're talking very small amounts. Oh, I forgot boron's another one in there too. But the other option, there's a couple companies that take these sulfates and then chelate them with things like glycine, like Biomin would be one, and then Albion would be another. You can, by chelating it, what it does, it essentially makes it into a form that the plant can immediately use or take up. So these are things that can be applied from a foliar perspective, or you can use them as a soil drench, and then retest your soils and see how much that raised the micronutrient level. But I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't consider is these micronutrients. And you're also going to get micronutrients from various rock dusts, but you have to be careful there, as well as compost and earthworm castings are a great source for organic micronutrient sources.
Yeah, I think we're probably all in this room, if you're sitting here in this session, you've probably heard of mycorrhizal fungi. And I think that cultivation practices where your mycorrhizal fungi populations are high and are functioning are a really good way to get access to all of these nutrients that are bound up in the rocks that are in the soil. And when I say rocks, I don't mean big boulders, but particles, rock particles that are out in the soil. They are made of many of these minerals that Tad just listed out. And here we have this fungi that started a co-evolutionary relationship with the botanical world millions of years ago. Before there were plants, there were mycorrhizal fungi, because they were the decomposers at that time that were decomposing the organic matter that was around. Plants came out of the oceans and the other water bodies, and they struck up relationships with these mycorrhizal fungi that are every bit as intricate and specialized and intimate as those that go on between the pollinators and flowering plants. So I think we've got this piece of biology that is long-standing, ancient, and when you've got those mycorrhizal fungi that can extend, they're functionally basically extending the plant's roots out into areas of the soil that the plant would otherwise not have access to. And so I think ways of encouraging the mycorrhizal fungi so that they're making these things in the soil, these various micronutrients and minerals available to the plant. It's sort of like, maybe this is a little too smart home, smart house stuff, but it might raise some security issues, but I would sort of like it if the Postal Service could deliver my package, not just to my door, but inside the house and inside the cupboard where it is that I need it. And so I think can sometimes be, when people are starting to add things into the soil, you really want to make sure that they're bioavailable. And one way of doing that, I think, is to make sure you've got robust mycorrhizal fungi populations. And that you've got a plant that's pushing the exudates out, because that fungi is not going to hand over any minerals unless there's something on the other end. So it's really having this whole system in the soil between the plant and the microbiome.
Great. So we're doing really well on time, and I'm going to add one more question that I didn't worry about ahead of time, since we're doing so well on time. I recognize a lot of faces in the audience of people who are pretty dedicated to living soils, people that I've spoken with before. And I think that it would be a missed opportunity to have you three experts here without asking you, in all of, you travel around, you're speaking at conventions, hundreds of people are asking you questions in person and via email. Other than, damn it, get your soil tested, which I know would be probably the uniform answer, other than getting your soil tested, what would you say is one piece of advice that you would offer folks that are developing their living soil for their farm that they may not be thinking about and they should be? People are asking you questions, they're like, oh my gosh, I wish they would have known X. what is that thing that you just wish you could let everybody know so that they're more likely to have success? And Colin, I'm going to start with you.
Great. So I do think about this a lot. I talk to people all the time. I think one of the biggest gaps is just this inherent knowledge of what microbial groups actually do. You know, there's mycorrhizal fungi that Anne just spoke of. There's other kind of saprophytic fungi that are available in products and in nature, of course. There's many different species and groups of bacteria, and they all have these different functions. And if you group them all as microbes, you're missing the resolution that you need for precision agriculture, and that's what we need if we're going to apply microbes with precision, especially in our cannabis grows. You know, for example, I was just talking about muscular mycorrhizal fungi. What do? They're not really enzymatically capable. They don't cycle a lot of nutrients, but they're really important symbionts that will actually infect your plant root, and they'll create our muscular sites in the cortical cells of your plant roots, and they extend out. Nature is critical because they extend out beyond the surface area of your roots to take up more nutrients and take up more water. And there's actually an interesting exchange of phosphorus for carbon, like Anne alluded, in that particular relationship. It's really important. But that's all that fungi really does. And so, is it applicable for your hydroponic system? Ask yourself that question. Look at the limitations of infection sites. Those are the type of things that I would be asking as a grower if I was digging into the details of microbiology. What do bacteria do? Bacteria are very enzymatically capable. They're really not going to infect your plant, necessarily beneficial bacteria, but they continue to cycle nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, micronutrients, and make them bioavailable. They're not delivering them to your plant, they're making them available so your plant can take them up. There's other species of trichoderma that are really good at cycling carbon and growing out and creating some enzymes for carbon degradation that breaks down everything in general. And there's interactions between all these things. It's not simple. It takes some time to kind of soak up the information. But if you understand what these groups are doing, you can think about what the importance is of those in your particular grow and how you can apply those with confidence that they're going to benefit your plant in the particular environment that you have. Some are going to be more applicable in deep water culture systems, some are much more applicable in outdoor growing, and some are, across the board beneficial for different reasons, if that makes sense.
Anne, what are your thoughts? And then we'll finish up with Tad.
Yeah, I think I talk more with sort of organic and conventional farmers than really cannabis growers. But one of the things that I always find so interesting, especially if I go out to somebody's farm, and this is what I would encourage everybody to do, particularly if maybe you've acquired a piece of land recently or you're thinking of doing so. I think it's really a good idea to learn what you can about the history of that land, and to look around at the landscape and to see how is it that things are happening. Like, what are some of the native plant communities like? What kinds of plants do you see really thriving? Talking with your neighbor farmers, because one of the, this depends, maybe they're not going to tell you where they failed and they're only going to tell you where they succeeded, but you want to know both of those things. You want to know, okay, so they tried that, didn't seem like it worked, but I think I see a way maybe to tweak that. So I think there's a lot to be gained from talking with other cultivators and from looking at the landscape in which you're growing to just take note of things like the direction that the sun is coming from and how you're thinking maybe of siting buildings and siting your fields and so on. I was at an outdoor cannabis farm last summer, and they were getting hammered. I don't remember what direction the wind was coming from, but they said, yeah, we didn't know when we set things up here that the wind always came out of, say, the south, but they had to, some of the plants were staked. They were getting so beaten by the wind. And so it's paying attention to sort of the physical and natural features of a piece of property so that you know, so that you can take advantage of what it is that you have there. So that would be my one piece of advice.
Yeah, I really like that point. That's something that I'm going to talk about tomorrow as one of my things. But yeah, I think that's really important. For me, I'm going to take a totally different approach to this and say there's a whole bunch of people out there trying to sell you products. Myself included in that group in college. Evaluate what they have to say, look at the ingredient list, really take a smart eye. Why are you growing the way you're growing? And just really evaluate that. Because I find a lot of people will go out there, they'll grab 30 samples and bring it back to their garden. They'll apply all of them all at once with no scientific method, and then you really don't know if they did anything. So I would just say challenge the claims out there, look to agriculture if you really want to see where products are successful. If they can make it in ag or ornamental greenhouses or horticulture, then that speaks volumes in a lot of ways. And like, for example, with mycorrhizal fungus, there is information out there that you can educate yourself on. Like, we know that with cannabis, you're looking at what was formerly called Glomus intraradices and Glomus mossae, and two that are known to infect cannabis. Now it's also it's been changed to Rhizosphere and irregularis. But you can look on a label and see if it has it on there, and you can purchase that product for your cannabis plant. So you're not buying ectomycorrhiza, which infects conifers and isn't going to do a whole lot necessarily to help the plant, but you can get one specific for your crop. And then you can look at spore counts and say, okay, well, this product has this spore count. Is it accurate? That's a whole other thing with the Oregon Department of Ag, and they've done testing on that. But it's a starting point at least. And then take it back and run trials. I think a portion of your garden should be dedicated to trying out new things and testing out these ideas and these products and see if they're worth your time and your money and something that you want to incorporate in your garden style.
Right, well said. And I think the idea of making sure you look at the ingredients and maybe even ask questions and confirm, that's a good idea. I was talking with Kevin Jodry from Wonderland Nursery the other day, and he's like, the reason why we're finding out there's so many hidden things in these products for cannabis is because historically we couldn't sue them if they were selling us BS, right? We had to just take it and we had to be quiet because we were during the Prohibition days. But now that we're legitimate companies and we've got at least some amount of legal standing, some of these companies that have been selling products with hidden ingredients are going to be taken to task. So don't be afraid of being part of that. So we're going to go ahead and we got time for a couple questions. We're using this awesome device today. Check, check. And all you need to do is when I hand it or toss it to you, capture it and just talk to it because it's a microphone right here. So who's got a question? Oh, real? Come on. Excellent.
Tad, you had mentioned earlier supplementing things like copper chelate. Does those chelated nutrients put the microbial population in any danger?
I think...
Will you repeat the question, Tad? The microphone didn't kick on.
Oh, hello.
No, Tad, just you repeat it. Thanks.
Okay, so he was asking if these chelated micronutrients are affecting the microbial populations, if there's a concern that they may be damaging them. That's a great question. I know with copper, for example, we're talking about parts per million. So it's a very small amount that we're applying. Now, if copper sulfate, on the other hand, yes, it's known to damage, kill microbes. So you do want to be aware of that. I think Colin might be a better person to answer this, but in my experience, if they're used responsibly in small amounts, they don't have a dramatic effect on the microbial communities, but there's not enough research out there that I personally see.
Yeah, just to tag on that, I think that's exactly right. All life has thresholds. You add enough of any one thing, there's a threshold and will kill off, whatever. At the end of the day, we know that microbes naturally chelate. And so you're not adding in anything the microbes don't already do naturally. It just kind of eliminates that step or speeds up that chelation step. If you have a healthy microbial population, bacteria and some fungi, they'll chelate nutrients, but there's that process. If you can add them in there, they're just more quickly available to the plant. And so there's that delivery trade-off that you're negotiating when you add nutrients like that. At the end of the day, I wouldn't see any risk at all except for what Tad said, and again, that threshold thing I was talking about.
I did bring up one thing that I thought of though, is with mycorrhizal fungus, if you are applying high levels of phosphorus, then the plant will think that it doesn't need to form this relationship, which has all these other benefits that Anne listed. So we do want to be careful in that regard with certain nutrients that we're not affecting the way our microbial changes.
Yeah, I'll talk about that for 1 second too. I think that's a really interesting point that I didn't want to get into the details on, but there's a lot of research, published papers out there where you can see direct positive correlations with, or negative correlations with increased phosphorus levels and decrease infection rates of mycorrhizae. And infection sounds like a bad thing, but you have to have that for the success of that relationship between that plant and that particular fungi. And if you have excessive phosphorus, and there's ranges out there that are critical ranges that really limit the infection. And so thinking about those things, it's the interactions. There's no black or white, there's all these interactions. That's what makes it a little more complicated to kind of think about between your nutrients and your life and your plants and the absorption of the soil. And so it's kind of this dynamic thing that Anne was talking about that we have to consider in the bigger picture.
Do you want to tag in on this at all, Anne, or shall we just move forward?
No, I think they got it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Commercial fruits and vegetables, how is this philosophy and execution impacting commercial fruits and vegetables? Are they picking it up? Will we be able to buy no-till fruits and vegetables soon?
Wow, yeah, that's music to my ears. Yeah, there has been, if you, farming is sort of, let's put it this way, a small part of farming is maybe in the early stages of a revolution, and no-till, which means not using the plow. That's when you hear the word no-till, that means that farmers not using a plow, but they're getting seeds into the ground by drilling a very small hole, dropping the seed and moving on. So in an orchard situation, which is different because you have these established trees, yeah, some people plows are also used for weed control. And so what the kind of orchard you want, and some orchardists are doing this, is they're doing cover crops and allowing so-called weeds to come in and live in the rows between their trees. Because we talked about all of this life in the soil, and if you're running on an annual basis or more frequently some kind of a plow in the rows between your trees, you're ripping that soil, you're exposing it, to erosion, you're killing off, a bunch of members in the microbiome. So some fruit growers are moving, yes, more toward no-till, as are some vineyard wine growers, grape growers as well. And I will tell you this, and I don't know if they're in the room, but the outdoor cannabis farm that I went to last summer, they were on the right track with a lot of things, but one of the things that I didn't like seeing there is that there was open soil in between the rows where they had their plants. And I just looked at that and I thought, there could be plants growing here, not cannabis plants, but other kinds of plants that could be walked upon. And the whole thing about a cover crop, and why you want your soil covered, is we've talked about exudates and the biological bazaar and all of these things. A plant is a food factory for the microbiome. So when I saw those bare patches, much like this aisleway right here on that outdoor grow farm, I thought, wow, they could be feeding a bunch of microbes that are going to be feeding the cannabis plants. And so I would like to see some kind of a cover crop that's walkable upon, and get all of this covered, get all of this covered up. And so that's sort of the idea with some orchardists. And Tad may have more to say about this because he's got a farm where he does, grow things. And I don't know what got any ideas on that.
Yeah, the farm's a little bit of a misnomer with our piece of property. But we do grow giant pumpkins, and we have a community U-pick area. We don't use a rototiller on our property. But what I was going to say is there's a great book by, I might butcher the name, it's called One Straw Revolution.
Well, that's exactly the title.
Masanobu Fukuoka, I think it is. I should know this in Japanese. But it's a great book, and it talks about this concept in more detail if you're interested in it. But I do think people are looking into these sorts of types of cultivation outside of cannabis, which has been around for a long time.
I'll add on the microbial piece. Microbes and microbial biostimulants are the quickest growing sector in general agriculture, and microbes in general and microbial biostimulants are thought to probably significantly displace chemical fertilizers over the next 2 decades. It's a huge movement. We work with a lot of tomato growers, a lot of strawberry growers. They think there's this economic piece and this compatibility piece. It has to scale. It has to bring a huge ROI or an ROI that makes sense. and it has to fit right into those management practices. And so not all practices, I think, are up to the conventional farming practices, but it's getting there. And it's, again, a quickly growing agriculture segment.
Fantastic. And you know, when we're thinking about the actual application to business, it's important to remember too that you know, the way that consumers are going are towards living soil. They don't want pesticides they use. They don't want synthetic chemicals used. And the industry, one way or another, is headed towards living soil. As a matter of fact, it's a marketing win for you to say that your plants are grown in living soil. So if you're thinking like, oh man, this is just something else I'm going to have to spend my time on, you know, so maybe think of it both as self-education, but also giving some help to the marketing department, because it's going to make your product more desirable. So I want to thank Colin Bell from Mammoth Microbes, Tad Hussey from Keep It Simple Organics, and Anne Bikle. And so a couple other things. So Colin is at the Mammoth Microbes booth if you want to chat with him further. And Anne will actually be signing her book. And do you have copies available too? Or?
Yeah.
So and you can buy copies of her book also at the Mammoth Microbes booth. Tad has got his booth at the Keep It Simple Organics booth. And also, you can go to kisorganics.com to listen to his fabulous podcast about growing cannabis with living soil. If you came in like halfway through this presentation, or if you just want to watch it again, or have one of your coworkers watch it, you'll be able to see it starting Monday on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Shango And if you dig listening to super experts like this, make sure you check out my own podcast at shavingfire.com. Thank you very much for attending, and have a great convention. Thank you.